All right, hello everyone. I'm Eric Rentz, member of the Norwich Energy Committee. Tonight's event is the second in our Electrify Everything series. We're calling the event Cut, parentheses, Emissions from Your Lawn. Now, a quick step back. Why should we focus on electrification? Climate policy analysts are in general agreement that switching from fossil fuel consumption towards electric solutions has a positive impact on climate change while simultaneously bringing myriad positive externalities. As our electric grid becomes more efficient and relies more on renewable energy, electrification is the fastest route away from fossil fuel dependence. Tonight, our keynote speaker, Stephen Wisbaum, will discuss the hows and whys of electrifying lawn care and chore tools. Then Lynn Andrews of the Norwich Conservation Commission will discuss with us ways that we can reduce our need for traditional lawn care while increasing wildlife value. We will wrap the evening with some Q&A with our speakers. For that, we'll also bring in a local team that offers electric mowing and lawn reduction services that can speak to some of the decisions they made while electrifying. I'd also encourage any converts in the audience who want to raise their hand to jump in for the Q&A. Now, before we get started, I'd love to get a sense for the folks that are here. I'll try to do a couple questions. We can see how this works. See if we can get people to raise their hands and raise their hands in Zoom to answer these yes no questions. So, do we have anyone who owns an electric mower in the audience?
Yes, I do. Nancy.
All right.
I do as well.
Okay. Okay. How many people are out there hoping that they're going to get enough information for an upcoming electric mower or chore tool purchase that they're considering? Who's out there looking? Okay, we got a couple. And then last, do we have any vendors, contractors in the audience tonight? Good. I thought that we were going to have one. We were going to have one. All right. Well, with all that, I think that I will turn it back, I guess. Turn it over to Stephen Wisbaum, founder of the Mow Electric campaign. He's joining us from the other side of the state. So, Stephen, why don't you take it away? Let me know if you need any help.
Great, thank you. Thanks to Linda and Eric for putting this on and inviting me to speak, share some information and answer questions about electric lawn care. While they invited me to do this because of my work over the last 4 years selling commercial electric lawnmowers and more recently founding the Mow Electric campaign, because the industry is so new and so many products are new and improved products are being introduced every year, I'm still very much in the learning mode myself. So just wanted to mention that straight off. I'm by no means an expert, and there really probably aren't too many experts in the electric lawn care industry because it is so new. So a little bit about my background. First became aware of human-caused climate change in an environmental science class at Sonoma State University in Northern California in 1978. I'm going to date myself. 43 years ago. It was called the greenhouse effect then. And it was definitely something that I've been thinking about ever since. And I graduated with a degree in environmental studies and planning and an unofficial degree in organic agriculture and composting. And over the next 40 years, I've made an effort both on a personal and professional level to do what I can to reduce my carbon footprint. And these things I've done, I started in 1996. I started a compost business called Champlain Valley Compost Company here in the Champlain Valley, obviously, that I'm still running. Initially, I was doing custom composting, and I spent some time in the Upper Valley composting for my biggest customers and longest customers was Longwind, which many of you are probably familiar with, in East Thetford. I then at some point helped design and build a straw bale home with a solar hot water system, PV system, cold climate heat pump, more recently, primarily heated with about 3 cords of wood. And the house is pretty naturally cooled, or at least it was up until the last few years because of climate change. There's less nights. There's more nights that the temperature doesn't drop sufficiently in the night for us to cool our home. Very noticeable difference. One of the reasons we got a cold climate heat pump actually was to provide a little cool air in our bedroom so we could sleep. Leased a first electric car about 8 years ago. About 15 years ago, I convinced our homeowners association to turn, we had a gas mower that we were mowing about 6 acres with. And I had been introduced to someone who was making biodiesel at the University of Vermont. And I would go there with 5-gallon pails and use biodiesel for my skid steer for my business. And I thought, well, we should just run biodiesel with our mower. And we did for a couple of years, but a lot of problems with water in the fuel. It caused a lot of problems. So we were burning diesel for the last, I don't know, a number of years. And I, at one point, I was aware that there was electric riding mowers. I saw one. It wasn't going to be heavy duty enough for us to mow 6 acres. So I was just waiting. And then one day I went online and found this company in Ohio called Mean Green Products. Saw that they were producing or manufacturing they were the first manufacturer of commercial electric lawnmowers. Started about 10 years ago. And there was a few people up in the Champlain Valley that was using them, 2 contractors. I think there was a total of 2 Mean Green mowers in the entire state. They didn't have a rep up here, so I said, I want to buy one and I want to be your rep. And I spent the next 4 years marketing them and becoming an advocate for electric lawn care. Last year, the company was purchased by DR Power Equipment, and who was in turn owned by Generac, and which I kind of knew would happen at some point because the company was just exploding, so popular, selling so many mowers. And just when I really started to get some traction selling, I think I sold about 30 mowers last year throughout Vermont, Maine, Eastern New York, and New Hampshire. They let me go. So I decided I had invested too much time and money, and I really wanted to see this transformation of lawn care to electric. So I founded the Mow Electric campaign, and my son and I built a website and launched that just on Earth Day, and here we are. So initially I thought it would be really easy to sell electric lawnmowers in Vermont, but I soon discovered, even in my own community, they weren't ready to commit to it. And but I worked really hard at it, and eventually our community did buy one. And my experience of doing that, I wrote an article called Overcoming the Cultural, Institutional, and Technological Barriers to the Adoption of Electric Lawn Care in Vermont. And that's on my website, on the Mow Electric website under advocacy, I believe. There is, but that being said, things are really starting to take off, and this event is an indication of that. And there's another event, the 27th, that another energy committee is putting on, where there's now 3 commercial electric lawn mowers, and I'm going to get into that later. So that's my background, and here we are, and I'm just going to launch into this this presentation, and there'll be time for questions afterwards. So why is that not going forward? All right. Anyway, it did now. All right, here we go. That's the campaign. That's the screenshot of our website, and you'll see. I invite you all at some point, maybe even during this presentation, if you get bored, you can go to the website, and there's a lot of material. And really, the website is designed to be a resource clearinghouse, and to really grow, well, as we said, grow the electric lawn care movement, and do that through grassroots activities like Linda and Eric putting this event on. And then there's opportunities, well, you'll see, there's people can get involved in any number of ways. So why is this important? Eric touched on some of this, but I ran across these figures, which I thought were pretty interesting. 2.6 billion gallons of gasoline and 100 million gallons of diesel, 54 billion pounds of CO2 are estimated to be produced with through lawn care in the country. And in Vermont, we're looking at almost 5.5 million gallons of gasoline. There's nothing about diesel. It's probably another million gallons of diesel fuel. You're looking at 3 million pounds of carbon dioxide. So, that's just CO2 emissions. But what was really interesting to me was actually looking at what an individual mower. So these figures are for a conventional commercial mower that you see contractors use, institutions, these big mowers, these rig riding mowers. Average about a gallon of fuel per hour, which most people don't know this, but a gallon of fuel burned is about 20 pounds of CO2, releases 20 pounds of CO2. And that why it's more than, anyway. And then if you look at a typical mower that is used 690 hours a year, you're looking at about 690 gallons. So this is one individual mower. Almost 7 tons of carbon dioxide. So every time you see a mower on the back of a trailer moving around, going and mowing people's lawns, that's what that mower is producing. Versus an electric mower, Mean Green mowers used about 2.8 kilowatts per hour of operation. I don't know if that's probably pretty close to what the other manufacturers' mowers are doing as well. And then, so then your question is, well, what's the greenhouse gas, what's the carbon dioxide associated with that electricity? Because even in Vermont, we have a pretty good portfolio where pretty high percentage of the electricity used in Vermont is coming from renewable sources, and it's been getting better every year. But the state a couple years ago figured it's about 0.26 pounds of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So that means that electric mower is producing about 0.73 pounds of CO2 per hour. And then over 690 hours, you're looking at 0.25, so a quarter ton versus 7 tons of CO2. So pretty dramatic difference there. And then looking at it per acre, which I thought was also, these were numbers that I've just kind of come up with, best guess, based on speed of mower and different things. You're looking at between 7 and 14 gallons of fossil fuel per season per acre for a conventional mower. That's about, again, you're 20 pounds per gallon. You're looking at 140 to 280 pounds of carbon dioxide per season per acre, or per acre per season. Versus an electric mower, you're looking at 8 pounds of CO2 per season per acre. And again, this is these larger conventional mowers. The numbers are going to be different for the homeowner versions, but those use some gas as well. Obviously much less, but anyway. And then you have tailpipe emissions. I just noticed listening to the radio today, I get North Country Public Radio, and there's actually a health alert with air emissions. Ozone levels are now already today were high enough to issue an alert. And that's what happens. That's part of the smog forming air pollution. Obviously, it's not all from lawnmowers. It's probably coal-fired plants in the Midwest that's, that's coming over here. But anyway, it's lawnmowers are notoriously dirty because they don't have any air emission controls. I saw somewhere EPA 1 horsepower for every horsepower, it's equivalent to about 3 automobiles driving at 55. Whether it's 3, whether it's 5, whether it's 2, it's significant versus an electric mower, which has 0 tailpipe emissions. And then you have the noise issue, which is significant as well. And I have produced a little video that I'm going to play right now, hopefully. Should be able to play it. Oh, here we go. You're going to need to turn your volume up so you can hear the electric mower. I'll warn you. So that mower we saw right there. Oh, how do I get out of here? Come on. Anyway, how do I get out? Escape, maybe. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to fast forward here. So then the question is, what are the economic benefits? And this is geared towards commercial mowers. This information is also going to be applied to some degree with homeowners as well. Obviously, they're using a lot less fuel, but so yeah. So the electricity used costed a fraction of the cost of diesel. You're looking at 50 cents an hour versus 275 to 375 an hour. That's the price of a gallon of gas, depending on the year and the season. Typically, it goes up in the summer. And that 50 cents an hour is based on the 2 kilowatts an hour at 16 cents an hour, or 16 cents a kilowatt. And then in terms of maintenance, there's no belts or hydraulics. There's no tune-ups needed, no oil changes, obviously. So it's just blade sharpening and replacement, which you need to do anyway. And then the repair costs are considerably lower for electric because there's so few moving parts. So all this kind of can be looked at in terms of life cycle cost. They do cost more to purchase, but they have lower operating costs, and they also depreciate a lot less or slower because there's just so few things to wear out. So a commercial electric mower is probably going to be used for 10, 12, 15 years. And then at that point, the replacing the motors is going to be pretty simple and inexpensive. So there's that chart there shows what the life cycle cost comparison is. And it's pretty dramatic. But what a lot of people get stuck on in trying to sell these mowers to, institutions, universities, contractors, they just look at the price, and they're looking at a $24,000 mower, and they look at that and they say, well, why should I spend $24,000 when I can get a conventional for 14? So it's $10,000 difference. But they're not looking at the life cycle cost. If they did, they would see this, which is why I produced this graph to try and communicate that. And this is all on the website as well, on the Why Electric. So if you're trying to convince, your local town or, your church or whoever it is, there's a lot of resources on the website to make the case. So I'm going to talk a bit about equipment right now, and I'm making the distinction between residential and commercial. We're talking with mowers, you're basically, for residential, you're talking walk behind, riding, and yes, robotic mowers. And I've got a slide you'll see. And then the chore tools are string trimmers, blowers, chainsaws, that sort of thing. Commercial is basically the same thing, except commercial mowers also make something called a stand-on, which you've probably seen. Chore tools are going to be the same. I put this slide together 2 years ago, and there's probably now another 8 companies that are producing electric walk-behind mowers. I've heard good things about all of them, and I haven't really heard anything bad about any of them, but we're just started to collect reviews, so I'm hoping to hear something bad. They're all pretty good. And there's actually on the website, what we've included, in addition to reviews you can use, which we don't have many up yet, I've have some links to some video comparisons, which are really great that I found. There's a couple YouTube channels out there where they've compared some of these. Also, someone just sent me, and I didn't include it, they sent me a Consumer Reports article that looked really good. Residential riding mowers. The newest one is the Ego, which is on the bottom right. The Cub Cadet made one of the first ones, actually probably, about 8 years ago, had a lot of problems with it. They're coming out with a new one now. Ryobi started, they're produced a steer type, and then they produced this zero turn about also just within the last 2 or 3 years. That's a $4,000 mower. The Ego just came out this year. Ego makes they make a lot of really good products, and that mower is $5,000, which is probably a good couple $1,000s then over the cost of a conventional mower. But there's going to be cost savings in there. And then Greenworks they're a little pricier. I think they're in the $7,000-8,000 range. And then there's quite a selection. Robomo was the first one. I don't know how many of you, some of you are probably familiar with the Green Energy Times, and the editor, publisher of that is I'm blanking on her name. She's the regional rep for Robomo, and she hasn't mowed her lawn, she said, in like 5 years or something. It's pretty extraordinary how these things work. They're pretty intuitive. They just mow on their own, come back to their charging station. And so they're not suitable for every location, but they're suitable for a lot. And they are a little more pricey. You're looking at a couple $1,000s, I think, for one of these. And then there's a lot of handheld lawn care tools or chore tools. And, a lot of the same companies that are making the mowers, but there's some really great products out there. And I've started using electric chainsaw. My first one was a DeWalt. It was probably the first chainsaw they ever made. So I'm not using it anymore. It had a few quirks in it. And then I just got a Stihl to go with the string trimmer. And and then as far as commercial, when I started, as I said, Mean Green was the only sorry about that. Mean Green was the only manufacturer, and I knew that wasn't going to last long. And I was actually anxious and wanting there to be some other companies because that gave it more legitimacy. It was one of the barriers that I found, is that people felt like, well, if there's only one manufacturer, there must be a reason for that. They must not really be a good thing. So Greenwork came out with a couple commercial mowers, and I want to just put a caveat here. They're calling their mowers commercial. Unless someone tells me different, I wish they weren't doing that, because it's only a 4 to 5 hour runtime. And I don't feel like that really should qualify as a commercial unit. Most contractors or institutions are going to need a 6 to 7 hour runtime to be viable. And then Gravely just came out with this mower just this year, and it's available at the local vendor is Tucker Machine in Barrie. These are some of the people that I've sold mowers to over the last 4 years. State of Vermont up in the upper left, Northwest Regional Department of Forestry, Parks and Recreation. They've only bought one so far, but and then Dartmouth bought one. Actually, pretty much the first year I started, they were very. And then the next one up top is a local lawn care company. The far right top is our community, the 10 Stones where I live. There's some homeowners there. There's a picture of me in the Warren 4th of July parade doing my advocacy, getting the word out. So yeah. So who's using commercial electric lawnmowers in Vermont? As of this month, my understanding is there's the contractors you see on the left. They're all pretty much in Chittenden County, Northern Addison County. There's one up in Orleans, but he's a small operation. There's a new one in Windsor. And then there's a new one in Elper Valley, and Matt is part of this webinar. He's going to be introduced.
Hey guys.
So,
yeah, thanks for that, Steve.
There he is. And then some other ones, Burlington Parks and Rec has purchased 3 in the past year. Burlington Electric Department has 1, and our homeowner association and a couple farms. So it's not a huge number, but considering 4 years ago there was 2 companies that had them, the growth rate is pretty significant. So things you want to think about when you're looking for a mower. I'm just going to check my time here. Yeah, doing well. So obviously price is a consideration. And I just want to say that on our website, on the Mow Electric website, we've listed, I think, every manufacturer and every product that's available. Took a long time, and we've just recently linked those, so you can just click on it and go right to the website. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether the price includes batteries or not in the charger, and that's a big factor because the batteries in the chargers can be a couple $300. And then you'll often see voltage, like, oh, it's a 36 or 48 or whatever voltage. Really doesn't mean much at all in terms of runtime. What you're really looking for is the amp hour of the battery, the amount of and that's the amount of stored charge and energy. And then runtime, most of them will give a runtime. They'll say 40 minutes. Now, whether that's conservative estimate or a liberal estimate, you're going to have to take it with a grain of salt. But most of this equipment is designed to mow a yard of an average sized, third an acre or less in a single charge, like 40 minutes. That's pretty typical. 30 to 50 minutes is what you're going to get. And there's a great video comparison on the website, a link to this guy, Kite Army, where he actually took some mowers and just mowed a field for as long as the thing would go and timed it. And it's all, time lapse. You're not sitting there for 40 minutes watching this video. He's kind of a character. But anyway, charger speed may or may not really be an issue because, you know, some people really, once they mow for 40 minutes, they're not going to want to mow anymore. But if they do, they can also just get another battery. We bought 2 batteries for our steel equipment. You know, it's just nice when I'm using a chainsaw and it's like, okay, I 40 minutes, now I want another half hour, and I can just swap in another battery. You know, they all have different features, accessories, the materials durability. Some are more plastic, some are metal, or have more metal in them. You know, I tested out a Ryobi riding mower initially, the first one, and I just felt it was kind of like a toy and a lot of plastic. But for someone that has a half-acre lawn, they're mowing once a week, it's not going to make much difference, I don't think. Ease of use and cleaning. Again, there's a video of this guy did a video comparison of the Toro and the Ego. And he went into all these things about, you know, where the position of the handles were, and it was kind of interesting. But again, I have yet to meet anybody that tells me they don't like their electric mower. Most people are like, oh, I wish I had done this years ago. You know, warranty and customer support, it's not going to really be that. Again, I haven't run into anybody that's told me they've had problems with their mowers. But you know. So, and then the product reviews on our website. Hopefully, as time goes on, we'll have more. I think what we're going to get so far, what I'm hearing is people just saying, "I love my mower." We're not getting, you know, any negatives yet, but we've just started, so we'll see. And then, as I mentioned, the YouTube product comparison videos, links to the website, and then part of the campaign is to find people in various communities around the state that want to share their experience. And if someone's interested in a mower, they can come over and take a look at someone's mower. We're calling them ambassadors. And we've got a few people signed up, not very many yet, but hopefully that'll change. And you can also just post something on your local front porch forum, or, you know, ask around and talk to people like you would anything that you're getting ready to buy, a car or whatever. These incentive rebates, this is something, it was one of a project. It was literally my first marketing call was to Green Mountain Power, because I knew that in order for people to take electric lawn care seriously, it needed to have the legitimacy of having an incentive, and that would also help reduce the purchase price, which is significant. And I was able to do that. It took 18 months of my pushing and, you know, helping them find data, and you know, I think eventually they did it just to get me off their back. But it just took off, and then I went to all the other utilities, and so now and that's also on our website, all the list of all the utility incentives, and it's just Vermont, unfortunately. If there's anybody here from New Hampshire, but these will start happening in other states as well. Yeah, so thanks for listening. Visit the website. So when you get a mower, or if you have one, submit a product review, a testimonial, sign up to become an ambassador. And if you're looking for more contractors, because Matt's too busy, because you know, you can submit a form. We're collecting marketing data to encourage more contractors to make the switch, especially the existing contractors. They're going to be the hardest ones to, you know, they're just really attached to their gas powered mowers, and, you know, for all kinds of reasons. So thanks.
Great. I'm going to reserve most of the questions for the end, so we can have more of like an open Q&A forum type session. But right now, there is one question here that I thought might be good for you to clarify, Steve, which was, are there any incentives through Efficiency Vermont? And as my understanding is that they're through the utilities, is most of the incentives for the Tortola lawnmowers.
Yeah, I spent so many hours communicating with people at Efficiency Vermont, and I don't know why it took them so long to finally tell me why they were either ignoring me or they couldn't help, they couldn't do anything. And it was because Efficiency Vermont is efficiency utility that's created through legislation in the state. And their mandate was to reduce the use of electricity, okay? To create savings, help people use less electricity, okay? And although they got permission, or there was a special accommodation made to create the Drive Electric campaign, that was probably had to be legislated to give them permission to use money that they collect, that a certain portion of our electricity bill goes to fund Efficiency Vermont's programs. And so they can't just willy-nilly just say, oh, we're going to help. And so it's called fuel switching. That's what the difference is. And so I'm hoping in most recent legislation that's been passed or is getting ready to be passed in the state level, I've been advocating and other people have been advocating to give authority to expand the mandate of Efficiency Vermont to include fuel switching. And that could be boilers, that could be all kinds of things, switching from fossil fuels to electricity. And so that's why there isn't, these are just through the utilities right now. And the reason they're through the utilities is because of a piece of legislation that was created, I think under the Dean administration, called the Renewable Energy Standard. And it mandated that electricity producers, utilities, reduce their carbon emissions by a certain percentage, and it's stepped. So we're in tier 3 now. And then if they don't, then they have to pay the state some amount of money. So they, instead of paying the state money, they pay consumers money in the form of incentives and rebates to, whether it be buy an electric car, or in this case, an electric mower. And I will say that these incentives, there was never an incentive. It didn't exist before for electric mowers based on greenhouse gas emission reductions, which is why it took Green Mountain Power, 18 months to get it done. But it was also because of the Renewable Energy Standard that allowed that, which is why it's going to be difficult in other states. Although Southern California does have incentives, but it's based on the smog reduction. And they're actually, they were pretty generous when they existed, and they may still exist. So a long answer to a question, but thanks.
Yeah, well, I'm sure some of us out there enjoyed the long answer. All right, thank you. Well, we're going to shift over. Hold on for a second. We're going to shift over to Linwood Andrews, who's going to.
I'm going to stop my screen share. There you go.
There you go. And I will start sharing. All right, is everyone looking at Mowing for Climate and Wildlife?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, take it away, Linwood.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. The focus of my presentation, which is going to be about 15 minutes, followed by questions, is on reducing your carbon footprint and increasing the wildlife value of your lawn. What you grow and how you manage it significantly affects how much carbon is released from or stored from your property, and how much food you shelter and provide to wildlife. So we can go to the next slide. So you want me to say next for the slides, Eric?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Say next, and I'll jump to the next slide this time.
Okay, so we can go actually to the next slide. Which I'm not, it's still on the initial one.
I don't know if it's on slideshow. It may need to be on slideshow.
Are we seeing the slideshow now?
That's the second. We can now go to the third slide. Sorry. To the next one. So the traditional, that's great. The traditional lawn sown primarily with non-native grasses, often managed by adding fertilizers, pesticides, and water, and frequently mowed, has very low wildlife value. It supports few insects, and so it feeds few other animals. Also, soil temperatures are relatively high and not very much organic material is returned to the soil. So soil microorganisms are relatively sparse, and it's those microorganisms that drive a lot of the soil carbon storage. While some carbon is stored, there are other planting schemes that can store much more carbon. Using your electric equipment to maintain your lawn certainly reduces your carbon footprint. We happen to own an Ego lawnmower, electric lawnmower, battery-powered lawnmower, and find it works extremely well. However, reducing the amount of area that you mow will achieve even further gains, including higher carbon storage, increasing biodiversity on your property, and increasing wildlife value. So we can go to the next slide. For those areas that remain lawn, mowing frequency influences biodiversity, wildlife value, and soil carbon. So how do we get from lawn to something else? How do we convert our lawn area? One of the things that you want to do is critically evaluate how much of the lawn you actually use and need to keep relatively short. What's necessary for the activities that you do? What part of your lawn is just for looks? And what part of your lawn is there from inertia? In other words, you purchased this property, it was already lawn, and you just haven't changed it for reasons that are inertia. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide? There. So one of the things that can be difficult is adjusting your aesthetic preferences. So this happens to be a lawn that my parents created, and it's your traditional sort of what I would call a living room look. You have your carpet and you have your fancy furniture, and it's very stylized and highly curated. Speaking for myself, I've come to learn to identify native plants and insects and birds and how they interact and depend on each other. The highly manicured lawn, like you see here, is less appealing. Next slide, please. What I want is my property to look less like my living room and more like a natural plant community. So this is Bethesda, Maryland. And the top left picture is the house when it was first purchased. And then all of the lawn area was converted to what was called a conservation landscaping scheme. And you can see in the summer, it's all native plants. And in the winter, those plants were not cut down. They were left and provide a lot of overwintering habitat for insects and birds. And so really my goal in this is to be able to go out and see the insects, to hear the birds, to share that with friends and grandchildren, and to know that I'm really feeding wildlife, that I'm not maintaining a lawn where there's absolutely nothing for them to eat. So by September, what I want to see is a lot of chewed leaves. I want to see a lot of seed heads. I want my garden to look a little scruffy, because if it doesn't look that way, I haven't fed anybody. Next slide, please. Once you delineate the areas that you no longer want to maintain as lawn, you'll need to decide on your goals and methods. Studies examining carbon sequestration indicate that most carbon storage occurs in canopy trees. So if your ultimate goal is to maximize carbon storage, reforesting is the way to go. Next slide, please. Another option is to create what I'm going to call a shaded lawn, which would look more like this, which is something that some people prefer. In order to achieve this, you can either let the area go and simply watch what moves in on its own, or you can go into a more planned planting scheme. If you just let it go, you're going to have a lot of natives moving in, but also a lot of non-natives. My recommendation would be to remove the non-natives. They generally outcompete the natives, and they provide significantly less food to wildlife. Next slide, please. I'd like to just give you a quick statistic from Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home. This is both in Bringing Nature Home and his new book, Nature's Best Hope. And Dr. Tallamy uses a reed called Phragmites, a very bad invasive, as his example. Phragmites was introduced to North America from Europe 500 years ago. In this country today, after 500 years, it supports only 5 insects. However, in Europe, it supports 170. So evolution and adaptation work very slowly to provide wildlife value through non-native plants. It really just doesn't happen. Another approach, as I said, is to plant trees instead of just letting nature take its course. And what you would want to do is plant trees that are indigenous to your county. To have the highest wildlife value. And I have several resources that would be helpful. This is a list that you would find in Dr. Tallamy's book about what trees support the highest number of leaf-eating insects. Not all of these are trees that you would find in, let's say, Windsor County, Vermont. But it's a useful list. It's a useful place to start from. Next slide, please. The Native Plant Trust, it used to be called the New England Wildflower Society, has a website called Go Botany. And this is where you can find out what are the trees, shrubs, and flowers that actually grow indigenously in every county, in every state in New England. So you can find out exactly what grows in Windsor County or Chittenden County or Addison or wherever you are. And that would be one of the best ways to start to formulate your list. I am also working on lists of plants and their growing requirements for Windsor County that I will be putting up on the Norwich Conservation Commission website soon. I haven't got them quite finished, but check in over time, and those will appear, and they will also be useful. Another native plant site that I use, next slide please, is the Lady Bird Johnson Wildlife Center. And it's based in Texas, but it covers the entire country. And it has a very useful feature where you can specify the state and the soil and moisture conditions that you're interested in, and it will generate a list of native plant recommendations for you. So you can put, full sun, Vermont, dry, and it'll generate a list of flowers, trees, or shrubs, whichever you designate, that thrive in full sun, dry soil in Vermont. And so that's another way that you can generate a list of trees or plants that you'd like to put in. Next slide. Wetland, Woodland, and Wildland. This book is going to help you develop a list that has a plant community. So different trees and shrubs and wildflowers like to grow together in nature. And to the degree that you can reproduce that on your property, you're going to have a more successful planting. And this book will help you determine which plants grow together in natural communities. So you've chosen your list of trees. Now, where do you get them? Trees that are planted as smaller saplings, while it takes longer to get your final effect, or will actually be healthier and do better in the long run than planting large trees for an instant effect. The other thing that you want to do is to pay attention to what's called the ecotype. And this means, where did the seed come from that produced the plant that you're planting? Did it come from Vermont or North Carolina or Virginia. And this makes a huge difference, even though we're talking about the same species of tree. So for example, a red maple that's grown from a wild tree in Virginia, a red maple tree, is not going to be adapted to the Vermont conditions as well it's going to be less well adapted to Vermont conditions than a red maple tree collected from a seed of a wild maple tree growing in Vermont. So that's the ecotype. We want at least a New England, better yet, a Vermont ecotype. Next slide, please. So here are two nurseries that tend to carry local ecotypes: the New Hampshire State Forest Nursery in Boscawen and the Intervale Conservation Nursery in Burlington. If you go to another nursery, even if it's something like Gardener's Supply or Brown's or wherever, really ask about the ecotype, because if you're getting a tree whose parent, if you will, is from North Carolina, it's less likely to be successful here in Vermont compared to one from New York or Michigan if you can't find a New England ecotype. So now that you've got your list of trees, you want to consider what are you going to plant under your trees. So next slide, please. Again, you can opt for a forest type of regime where you have understory trees, shrubs, and ground level plants, which is a little bit more like what you see on the right. Or you can have a more shaded lawn effect, which is what you see on the left, where you have a lot of canopy trees and then nothing in between until you get to the sort of carpet on the floor. The research on carbon storage really does not answer very well the question as to which one of these stores more carbon. Most of the studies conclude that the storage is the trees. It's not the understory. So I can't really recommend one over the other in terms of carbon storage. I will say that the more traditional woods type of effect, which you see on the right, is going to support much more biodiversity and will have a lot higher wildlife value than the one on the left, which is missing that the understory trees and the shrub layer. Next slide, please. So what are your options if canopy trees are just not in the mix for you? You cannot use them. Your next option is to go to an infrequently mowed field or meadow. This one happens to be my sister-in-law's backyard in Saxton's River. She started out with a completely mowed grass lawn, and she has gone out and just replaced small patches of it, a couple of patches a year, and she's done this over quite a few years, and this is now what she has. She has really a rather beautiful meadow that she mows once a year. And certainly this is a much better option in terms of biodiversity, carbon storage, and wildlife value than your traditional lawn. Now, mowing is a requirement here. If you let this go, it would go back to woods. So the question is, how do you maintain this with your brand new electric mower? Next slide, please. The most wildlife friendly mowing schedule is to break your converted area into thirds and use a 3-year cycle. So you're going to mow the first third the first year, and you're going to leave the other 2/3 unmowed. The second year, you're going to mow the middle third, and you're going to leave the other 2 unmowed. And the third year, you're going to mow the third section. So each third gets mowed once every 3 years, and then you repeat the cycle. Leaving 2/3 unmowed is important for maintaining the health of the plants, as well as providing overwintering habitat. So you want those flowers to develop seed and then drop that seed and in order to regenerate for future generations. If you mow it before the seed heads drop and produce seed, then you're not going to get any regeneration. The other question is that you need to think about is, are you going to do your single mowing in the fall, or you're going to do your single mowing in the spring? And one of the decision points tends to be, do you believe you have ground nesting birds in your field? If you do, then you want to mow in the early spring. I'm sorry. If you have ground nesting birds, you want to mow in the fall, because those ground nesting birds are producing their young in the spring. If you don't think you have ground nesting birds, then you can do a spring mowing, and that way you've left material over the winter for insects. So again, if you have ground nesting birds, you want to do a fall mowing, and here we're talking about the last week of October at the earliest, better yet November. If you have ground nesting birds, then you want to mow in March or April, and just once a year. Next slide, please. When you're planting your meadow, you also want to think of what kind of edges do you want? Do you want a flat meadow that goes up to a sheer wall of canopy trees? Or do you want a softer edge that goes from your flowers up to a strip of shrubs and taller flowers and smaller trees, and then your wall kind of canopy trees? So that's one consideration. The other consideration is whether you have grass in your meadow or not. Next slide, please. Kathy Neal, who is at the University of New Hampshire Extension Service, has developed a pollinator meadow regime that she has described on her website, which is 100% flowers. She has no grass. And it's really quite a thing to behold. She has demonstration plots in Dover, New Hampshire that she's had there for 10 years. She's mowed them once every 3 years, and they're completely going strong. She hasn't ever fertilized. She has never reseeded. They are completely self-generating. They're all native flowers. It is an expensive multi-year project to establish this kind of meadow. But once you have it established, it is very low maintenance. It is high wildlife value. It stores carbon well, and it's quite beautiful. You can do it in patches, but that's a longer process. Next slide, please. Actually, I think this one we can skip. So next one, this was the one I got in there, this is a book that just came out on April 29th, so I don't even own it yet, but looking at the reviews, I thought I would include it here because it really is all about how to take your lawn and convert it to a meadow. And so I offer this as another resource. Next slide, please. So now you can also convert your lawn by just smothering patches at small patches at a time. You're going to need to mow the grass to prevent it from going to seed until your whole area is converted. Otherwise, the grass will take over. You do not mow the flowers because you want them to produce seed. Next slide, please. The final thing that you want to consider in your meadow is to provide a succession of blooms for the insects and animals. They need to eat through the whole season. They can't eat only in August when all the flowers that you like are blooming. You really need to provide flowers that bloom successively from April through to the end of October to give a full season of food for your wildlife. Next slide, please. So now you have you've reduced your lawn. What about doing something better for your lawn? These are things that will increase the wildlife value and biodiversity in your lawn and improve to some degree the carbon storage. Stop using fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. yes, you will get quote unquote weeds in your lawn, but most of those weeds actually flower and feed bees. So allow flowering plants to inhabit your lawn to the degree that you can tolerate it. Leave your lawn clippings on the lawn. If they get all clumped, just spread them out, but you want to return that organic material to the soil. Mow every 2 or 3 weeks during the growing season. This is frequent enough to keep the grass relatively short so that you discourage ticks, but it's infrequent enough to allow the flowers to bloom so that the bees can come in there and eat. And then in conclusion, I would say get to know your floral and animal neighbors by name so that you can look for and forward to them year after year. I find this is the main thing in helping me get to an aesthetic that values a more wild, natural looking landscape than the highly manicured one that we've been used to. And that's the end of my talk.
Thank you, Linwood. Well, why don't I, so questions, I was saying questions at the end here. And for that, why don't we, we'll have questions for everyone. So why don't we jump in here and talk to Matt and Christina. We'll let them introduce themselves, and then let's open the forum for everyone. And one of those questions for Linwood, Stephen, or even Matt and Christina. So Matt and Christina, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, we live in Norwich up on Tiger Town. We've had rooting gardens for a while. We have a little off-grid homestead, and we have just started offering electric mowing to our offerings. We see ourselves more as a gardening service provider that is now including lawns with the goal of everything Miss Andrews has said. I'm not going to repeat it because she did such a good job. We can't add anything to it. We're trying to achieve her goal and realizing that there are lawns, even when they're smaller, they're going to have to be maintained properly with the best equipment available, reducing the amount of machines out there, and especially gas-powered machines. And that's the basic gist of what we do, to try to help people make the decision of how or why to select certain equipment. I'll just say what we did. What we did is we, as you can see in the picture, we have that mean green mower. Steve really helped us out, giving us a bunch of info, a lot of what he gave you today, and hooked me up with someone who was able to sell me that, which performs very well, professional grade equipment. If you were to go buy that in the store, you're probably going to pay somewhere around $18,000, and there are state rebates that come back from that. And as Steve said, it can pay for itself over the life of the time. The Ego riding mower that's coming out right now, I was into it at first, but they've delayed their release of it a couple times. So I'm personally not going to be an early adopter for that specific ride-on mower. And I also agree with Steve said about the other more homeowner riding mowers that you'd find at maybe Home Depot. They are cheaper. They are plastic. They're meant to fly off the shelves and get into your garage. And all of you know very, very well what planned obsolescence is and how technology can outpace itself. And I'm sure we all have some drill in our shed that has batteries that are not made anymore and that cannot be charged anymore, on and on. I think the best way to go about cutting your lawn is to first shrink it. Second, go with the professionals. Go with one good machine to service 30 homes or more, rather than having 30 homes each have another piece of plastic in the garage. However, people like their lawns, they like taking care of them, and now there's a bunch of options so you can do it yourself. And thinking about what your battery platform is that you already have, I think is an important decision. So say if you have Milwaukee tool set already, and you have a bunch of 5 amp and 8 amp batteries, great, use those batteries, get a tool that fits the batteries. You're buying into a battery technology, and the implements you plug those batteries into are less valuable than the batteries themselves, frankly. And I will try to keep this short and sweet. So I'm going to go through the different options of, you have a 0-turn mower, which is great. If you have a lawn, maybe over 2 acres, you have push mower, which you can crank through for a while. Some push mowers are self-propelled, more expensive, takes up a little more battery, easier to use in some ways, more equipment. So for me, we actually don't have a self-propelled push mower. We have one that we push ourselves to get the steep slopes and whatnot that our 0-turn can't get. So yeah, we have the 0-turn, we have the push mower, we have a string trimmer. For the string trimmers, there are some different commercial ones that have backpacks that you can get really intense electricity where you can cut down big weeds with blades. Or there's, the Ego, I think is a good one. That's what we have. You can pop on a 2.5 amp hour battery. They're not that expensive. It can do your 1/4 acre lawn. Or you can pop on an 8 amp, a 7.5 amp battery and go for a few hours. So thinking about the batteries you select, I think is more important than the actual tools. All the tools are going to work pretty well. Buyer beware if it's too inexpensive, but all of these tools are designed really, really well. And thinking about how many batteries you want to get is, I think, more important. So one 8 amp battery or one 10 amp battery is better than a couple 2.5 batteries because it's going to be more powerful for longer, to put it shortly. But a 2.5 amp battery is going to be nice and light. So if you're carrying around a weed whacker and you're not used to that, maybe you're not strong, get a lighter battery and replace it and swap it out maybe after half your lawn. But the conclusion I'm trying to get to is get one only if you're going to use it. Get the fewest amount of the tools you can get. Don't get a blower. Please don't get a blower, for your neighbor's sake, for the soil's sake, for everyone's sake. They're going to throw in a free battery. The blower is going to cost like $5. Why? Why do you think that? Because you don't need it. If you have a huge lawn that you can't rake it, I think you have to talk to Miss Andrews a little more, and she'll get your lawn smaller. She'll convince you, I'm sure. And when your lawn's small, you can really treat it well. Like you can treat it with compost. You can feed the soil, and the grass is more like the result. And check out our site, myrootedgardens.com. It's the same website as theelectriclawn.com. We have some info in there as to things basically you already heard today, but that's a good way to contact us. And when it comes to feeding the soil to get good grass, shrinking your lawn down so it's a manageable size so you can treat it properly, your costs go down over time, as you've all eloquently said. And I'm going to pass it to Christina because she's the one who can shrink your lawn, grow your garden, make a meadow, that route, which we all know is the better route. Unless if you have a herd of grandkids that want to go play soccer outside, great, maintain that lawn, but realize you can always bring it back to a lawn, assess your needs, and try to make your lawn as small as you can. And Christina will take it from here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, please. So really, Miss Andrews covered exactly what I do. So call me if you feel like you can't do it yourself. But yeah, I listed some of the similar resources I use to get my pollinators, my pollinator plants, and yeah, a lot of the same literature, but I do also love the wildseedproject.net. They're out of Maine and have great information there as well. And yeah, Doug Calame's books are wonderful. And then there's the Northeast pollinator plants. I listed that as another source of your perennials that you could include to create a garden or meadow, whatever you're trying to do with what used to be your lawn. So yeah, thank you.
I guess I already saw something else that I wanted to mention. I have a Sawzall for pruning, which is huge. If you're scared of a chainsaw, which you should be, everyone should be scared of chainsaws. The Sawzall, which is Milwaukee's reciprocating saw, it's great. It can replace the chainsaw in most homeowner applications. It's so much safer, lighter, and it's Milwaukee. So if you have other tools that are Milwaukee, you're not necessarily investing in a whole new platform. The pole saw, kind of the same thing. How many times are you really going to use that? The power broom, it's actually pretty handy, but you could do without it. It's not worth investing in the tool that has the zillion different attachments.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I really wanted
That's
to
what
add.
we've got. Thanks.
Well, thanks for jumping in with some of your experiences. I'll stop the presentation. And is there anyone else out there who wants to ask any questions? You can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat. You can, I think for the most part, people can unmute themselves and ask questions if they want to.
Hi, Eric and everybody. This is Linda Gray, also on the Energy Committee, and I just want to say I appreciate everybody's information. And Linwood, your presentation was really helpful, and I want to just make this suggestion, which is that like seeing before and after photos is, I think, really helpful. And I was thinking it would be great if we had somebody like in Norwich, that if we had somebody on Main Street who decided they wanted to make this change, and then that we could end up showing everybody, like if like the Historical Society wanted to do a section of their property, we could interest them in doing that, because then people would see it and decide, aha, because you're exactly right, like changing one's aesthetic expectations is the key thing. Probably many of us grew up in suburbs, and so we're used to, rectangular lawns and stuff. So I just want to put that idea in people's heads and see if it takes root like a wildflower.
That's a great idea. In fact, when I did my garden in Bethesda, there was the Montgomery County, Maryland, I'm not sure which department, parks and whatever. Anyway, they had a grant that you could apply for. So I got a grant to help me purchase the plants, the seeds and plugs that I used to create that garden. But I knew that my neighbors would be upset. So I created a very small berm that went across the front of my property, and I made a hedge so they can't see what's on the other side. And so I got no complaints because people don't mind a hedge. So I suspect that out here in the country, you'll have a little bit less of that pressure from homeowners associations who are saying, oh, you don't mow your lawn and all that sort of thing. But we could look into maybe creating a grant, or I can look and see if such a thing actually exists, and we might be able to entice some people to convert their lawns. There is a wonderful house right near the co-op in Hanover. As you go up past the co-op, up the hill on the right, where she or he has created this kind of front lawn. So there are people out there around here doing that.
I'd like to jump in on that too. I'm Carolyn. I'm actually in Wilder, and that's exactly what I'm doing on my front lawn. I live in a little historic neighborhood, and I'm putting in bioswales and edible landscape and pollinator species. And with the idea that people will stop, and whether they have complaints or not. If there are, I'm just going to put a sign out that says this house supports pollinator habitat and naturalization and, anything like that. But my hope is people will stop and talk to me as I'm putting it out there, and as I'm creating it over time by myself, so that people can see what can I actually do with a small space. And so anyway, I think it's a great idea. And I'd love to know if there's grants available for that.
Well, I'll definitely look into that and see.
Linwood, do you have
Me.
contact information? Is that available?
I could give you, I'm not sure what the mechanism would be. Perhaps I could, let me think about what Linda,
Carolyn,
Yeah.
is there?
this is Jack. This is Jack Cushman. Linwood's my wife. She's easy to contact.
Hi, Linwood. I'll contact you through Jack.
Okay, that works.
I'm with him on the Sierra Club. Executive.
Oh, okay, all right, there you go. Problem solved. Looks like maybe Nancy has her hand raised.
I see that. Yeah, I see that Nancy has her hand raised. Why don't you go ahead, Nancy? Nancy, you're still muted. If you didn't realize you were muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. If you let your grass grow 2 or 3 weeks and your lawnmower, the height of your lawnmower, I have an old Newton battery operated that I've had for 15 years. And I don't think it goes up that high, and you're supposed to only take 1/3 of the grass of the, mow it 1/3 of the height or something. So how would you do that if you let it grow, if you let the grass grow for 2 or 3 weeks? It might, you might take too much off if the height of your mower only goes to 3.5 inches.
I think so the 3-year mowing cycle, or
No, 3, you said every 2 or 3,
every 2 or 3 weeks for
yeah, that's what I'm talking
Mowed.
during the growing season.
Yeah, your lawn your lawn shouldn't be all that long after 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 or 3 weeks. You don't think it will be that long?
I don't think it will be that long.
Okay, because right now I haven't mowed my lawn because I kind of threw some seed in there, a lot of clover seed, so that probably is good. But right now, some of it's like 7 to 8 inches. So I don't know how the lawnmower is going to work on it, but I'll see. I do have a mulching blade, which might help.
Mhm. If I suppose if you have areas, if you have a weed whacker, if there are areas that have really gotten long, you could take the top off with your weed whacker before you use your lawnmower.
Yeah, I'm not a weed whacker fan, so I probably do that.
I have an electric one, and I have to say that I didn't like them at all, but this actually has been quite useful. We have both the Ego lawnmower, the push kind, and now I have the weed whacker, and I can use the same battery on both. So, so actually, it used to be something that I never did, but now I'm out there with.
Okay, because actually I haven't used it, but when I bought this little Newton years ago, it does have an attachment on the side. I think it is like a weed whacker type thing, but I've never used it, so maybe I can use that. That's a good idea. Thank you.
But if you have a growing season where your grass is growing super fast, then I would say, don't stick to the every 2 weeks.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I can add to that actually, Nancy, if it would help, because at some times of the year, you may be able to go the 2-3 weeks and push it, especially early spring. But there are times when, depending on your lawn, 3 weeks may be a lot for a mower without it just bending over the reeds of grass and not cutting. So you have to learn your lawn and realize that sometimes you're gonna have to cut it twice. If you're gonna let it go high and create a lot of clumpy grass clippings, which is fine, just go over it again in the perpendicular direction of your first mow. And that'll help you let the grass go a little longer between cuts. And
Okay.
yeah, use the string trimmer for whatever you can't get.
Okay, thank you.
Linda, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I have two things. One is I just want to put in a plug for reel mowers, REEL mowers. There are those with just human power behind them, and that can work pretty well. You wouldn't want to do an entire acre with that, but you can. Smaller spots. And Nancy's question, when she mentioned clover, raised a question in my mind, which is, are there, like, if you want an area that doesn't have tall stuff in it, what can any of you make suggestions as to other things besides grass?
You mean that wouldn't be mowed frequently, or that would be mowed frequently?
That would kind of serve the purpose in that it would end up not being very tall. You could mow it, but you wouldn't have to mow it perhaps as frequently as grass. Like I have a lot of moss growing in my lawn, which I really love because you really don't have to mow it, and so I'm just waiting for it to take over. But so is there anything else you could, like, specifically try to encourage?
I mean, there are new sort of native grass, infrequently mowed or no mow mixtures that are being developed. I personally have no experience with them, but I know they're out there. And so it's supposed to be grass varieties that don't naturally grow very tall, and that you could just have as a taller, sort of looser look. It's not going to look like your traditional, soldier straight grass blades up, but that's something to explore. I don't know if others have.
Yeah, if you do some searches, just like go on Google for native grass alternatives. They're like different carex varieties, CAREX, different sedges that are native and can be cut infrequently, can take some foot traffic. So if there's an area you walk, every once in a while, you can look up, and there are also guides of, wet or dry site, and you can kind of make some decisions from there and buy some seed.
But remember the ticks. Realistically, if you're gonna be planning a alternative lawn area that you want to stroll through,
Just fewer.
yeah, you can grow those, but figuring out of what is walkway and what is not walkway, I think does more than trying to say, I want the whole area to maybe be walkway or maybe not be walkway. And like defining uses is a helpful tool. It makes decisions easier.
One way I like to think of it and say to people is think of your lawn not as a wall-to-wall carpet, but as like runner carpets in your head.
Yeah, those are excellent suggestions. There's a really interesting series of research studies that were just recently published out of Springfield, Massachusetts, where they took lawns and had them mowed at different frequency schedules, 1 week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. And they looked at the number of ticks and also the number of visits by bees. And interestingly, they said previous studies had confounded different habitats. So studies that talked about high numbers of ticks on lawns had actually put together nearby wooded areas, sort of taller growing perennial beds, and frequently mowed lawn all in one. And they said, no, we really need to separate those things out. And so they just looked at the lawn area, not the perennial borders, not the woodland. And they found no ticks at all on the lawns. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to find a tick on your lawn, but where they found the ticks, highest frequency was in the wooded areas, not even in the taller sort of perennial borders. And their hypothesis was the ticks need leaf litter, they need humidity, and they need rodents. And you have low humidity, no rodents, and you don't have any leaf litter on a mowed lawn. And when they looked at the frequency of mowing, the highest bee visits were, interestingly enough, the every 2-week regime, not every 3-week regime, even though there were more flowers present every 3 weeks in the lawn. And they don't really know why, but their hypothesis was that the grass had gotten tall enough after 3 weeks that it was harder for the bees to sort of see the flowers, if you will, through the grass. And so every 2 weeks actually was seemed to be more supportive of bee presence than every 3 weeks. But they also talked about, as you've just said, maintaining those closely mowed pathways so that your clothing doesn't brush against anything as you're walking through, to really reduce that potential of getting ticks.
You're making my skin crawl. Are there any other questions out there? Well, great. Then I think that can be a wrap. Thank you so much, Stephen, for calling in from the other side of the state for this. Thank you so much, Linwood, for bringing all of your knowledge from the Conservation Commission, and thank you to My Rude Gardens for giving us a little bit of on the ground feedback, and also tying together the two sessions really well. All right, well, I think that about does it. So I'm going to end the meeting for everybody.
Thanks so much. It was wonderful and informative.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye-bye.